This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. It's episode 722. This week we welcome Pete Consigli, John Isaacson, and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick.
Don't fall prey to MUS, which is either made up stuff or, if you're a scientist, made up science. And what I took away from him is that it's all about science. Every building material has science behind it. I talked about the scientific method where you define a question, you conduct research, you propose a hypothesis, you can perform experiments to test the hypothesis. From that you get data and analysis, and from that you draw conclusions. One of the things I thought was fascinating is he had this slide of a piece of wood, and he talked about the different ways that wood could be cut, and that the manner in which they have the same log, the manner in which they cut that wood influences the amount of moisture resistance that wood's going to have, which I never really thought about before. And he pointed out that rift cutting that sawn wood is the most moisture resistant. And he said that we've known about this since 1919, when the Forest Products Laboratory of the U.S. Department of Agriculture conducted research on aircraft propellers. So those old double-wing planes from World War One,
wood propellers
were made out of wood. Yep. And then he talked about duration of loss, and he had done some experiments. He mentioned that OSB expands 30% in exposure to high relative humidity. Talked about window failure caused by OSB expanding around the window and creating pressure on the window and then making it leak. And he talked about, studying the elapsed time from leak to when it's noticed. A lot of people have a leak in their home. They don't recognize it. It can be from, refrigerator, water line going to the refrigerator for ice, or, something underneath the sink, and it's underneath the floor and it leaks for a long period of time before the people identify it. So he's done a lot of study on that. Over to you, John.
Yeah, that was, seeing, the simple tests that they put together to try to test different materials and the impacts of moisture and pressure. That was really interesting. And then his point to using the right materials in the environments. The flip side to that is, even if we have the data, still cost sometimes drives the materials that we use. So even if it's maybe subpar, it's not just the science, it's the market, and then educating the client on, why this costs more, but it is better in the long term, if the client even values that. So
let's go to the next one here. Keynote by Dr. Ralph Moon. What is technical competence? Why is it important? Planning for the day you get sued or are deposed. What do you do? Cliff?
One of the things, one of the great takeaways that I got was that different professions have different languages. And he says that the language used by engineering is different than language used in biology. He also said that building materials have unique languages as well. And we have a challenge to communicate and train the next generation that's coming along. He said that what comprises technical competence is knowledge, skills, the ability to problem solve, and communications. He said that you should look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I ascending in my profession or not? And if you don't feel you're ascending, you should do something about it. And he suggested more industry involvement or attending industry programs in order to do that. He said that technical competence is different than professional competence. And he said that in technical competence, workers often learn by mimicking. They have apprentice programs where plumbing is taught, or becoming an electrician is taught, or carpentry is taught. He said it's different than the professions. He said that, in the professions we learn and attend oftentimes through technical education and then through technical conferences. He mentioned that ATP can be a liability. ATP ATP measures cleanliness, not the types of microbes that are present. He reminded employers to keep their axes sharp. And I thought an excellent thing that he did was to get your employees to participate in industry in training within your company by sharing stories of what they learned on the job or how something that they learned applied to the project, and get them to tell stories. And that way, you're kind of raising everybody's education. The final thing I got was that technical competence is really a lifelong pursuit.
John?
I think these are still the notes. Oh yeah. I liked the formula for competence. He said, anticipate change and you will always be correct. And then, but also kind of building into your process the thought that what if I'm wrong, and analyzing what if I'm wrong and where might I be wrong? What factors might interfere with my data interpretation? Something as simple as getting your moisture meters, using them properly, and then making sure that they're calibrated. Does your team actually know how to use the moisture meters, what the readings are telling them, and then how to interpret that effectively? And they said, sadly, there's no consequence for incompetence. And that was part of the conversation is, what is the process as an industry to then, he was speaking primarily for the environmental professionals, but the same applies to the contractors is, what is that process of properly educating and holding people accountable for representing the industry, the right way.
Let's look at Joe Spurgeon, the essential elements of a professional formal report, how to defend your assessment reports, recommended protocols, and post-remediation verification. I think Joe's one of my favorite guests on the show.
All right. He said that if you want a defensible report, you have to write a quality report. And he said that defensible report writing is critical. And you need to document, for instance, he gave an example of documenting if you're going to take an air sample, what time did you take it? And that time is important because if that's the first thing you've done when you're on the particular job, you haven't stirred up anything, you haven't disturbed the indoor environment. So having the timing of that sample is important. He went on to say if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. He said the report may be the only thing occupants, the insurance company, or attorney will see. The report documents condition, the inspection process, and the results of the inspection. The report informs about the significance of the findings. The report communicates information. Data in the report is usable and actionable. And when you write a report, you may be called upon to defend the report in either a deposition or during a trial.
John?
I think it was during the question and answer portion, but they're talking about what should you do if the opposing side brings in really terrible expert witnesses? Do you want to get them thrown out or dismissed? And he goes, no, I love having them on the stand. So yeah, usable, actionable information. Again, like it doesn't have to be super complex, but it just needs to make sense.
All right.
Hey, Joe, the one thing I'll dovetail, I think that Joe's talk about reports really dovetailed off of what Jeremy was talking about. When Jeremy just used the case study and showed there were just so many bad reports, Joe came in because he gets requested to do a lot of reviews, and he said it's embarrassing, some of the things he sees in professional reports. So.
I agree.
So now we're going to move to the day 2 to Angela. So Cliff's up. Go ahead and read Angela's talk there.
Okay. Angela talked about contracts, AOBs, collections, and preventing going legal. Joe, a lot of the things that were in our interview with Angela, she touched upon there, and, she added some additional stuff to it. Let's see. Talked about the importance of knowing who your customer is, who's going to be paying you, the importance of having a good contract, the importance of knowing whether or not it's a covered loss, and if it's not a covered loss, does the client have the ability to pay? talked about managing expectations, communications, the importance of it, good documentation. She talked about using Encircle, and they've been on our program as well, and how an estimator can do a real-time video along with narration, and then the software actually prints out, gives you a printout of what was dictated. The importance of having regular communications, with the client, and scheduling required performance delivery schedule. So if the client's responsible for ordering something or making a choice of cabinets or something like that, they have to do it, and they have to understand that, that could adversely affect the project. Importance of documentation. Every time you have a conference with, someone, be it the adjuster, be it the client, you should make a memo and, kind of copy them back in. This is my understanding of, what we discussed. Talked about having a collection plan where you send your invoices properly. You then call the client and confirm that they've received it and ask whether or not they've had any questions. Then kind of mention when can we expect payment, and then you could gradually escalate as needed. She talked about lien rights and AOBs, making a decision. You could potentially mitigate the cost of dispute resolution. Some policies have an arbitration clause or have an appraisal clause, and she's kind of pro appraisal, when you can get that to happen. She talked about a reason for getting involved in a litigation, deciding to litigate. The contract has been breached. The client had unjust enrichment, something called quantum merit conversion or statutory conversion. She talked about doing a lien, and sometimes just the threat of a lien is more leverage than actually doing the lien. She talked about the litigation process, that there are timelines, real important in that litigation process. Let's see. Talked about when to compromise, when to consider it, when not to. And then she talked about industry setting precedents and how important that is. The restoration industry is small in comparison to the insurance industry and the amount of money we have to kind of further our industry interests, and that the best way to do it is through setting industry precedent cases. So if a contractor is really abused, perhaps that contractor should consider, taking this case to court, even going up to the Supreme Court, et cetera, because, a big win really can benefit the industry. Just a couple final things. She talked about always be careful what you put in writing. She talked about potential problem clients, hoarders being one, doctors being another. And one thing that was really a good idea is if you're in litigation or mediation, if you ask the mediator as to where he thinks the case is going to settle, in many situations he'll tell you, and you can go to the other side and say, look, this is where we're going to end up. Why don't we just go ahead and settle it now for that amount of money? So
yeah, instead of spending a bunch of money getting there anyway. So
right.
Okay,
really good stuff.
John, any thoughts on Angela Bajramaj?
She did a great job. I think a big portion of her presentation was on communication. So your day sales or being able to collect is impacted by regular and systematic communication. And then to Cliff's point, she gave some examples of some emails, and it's, be very careful what you put in writing, especially on your company, phone and email. Inter office communication will be subpoenaed. And then communication throughout that process. So once once, especially, you know, it's going to litigation, don't put it in an email or even a text unless your lawyer advises you to do so.